Okay, this lecture is going to cover muscular system structure and function. Now there are four major functions with the muscular system that you're going to need to know for the purposes of the test in this class and upcoming quizzes. The first one is that muscle tendons stabilize joints. If you didn't have tendons, right, the outer covering of the muscle becomes the fascia. We'll see that in a little bit. And that in itself becomes the tendon. If you don't have these tendons at the joints to hold them together and keep them stable, when you used your muscles to bend your arms or something like that, the bones would just sort of fall apart or pop out of joint at the elbow. So it's very important that you have tendons to hold everything together. Your muscles also help you fight gravity. Right? They have strength to them. They help keep you upright and standing. Otherwise, gravity's kind of trying to push you down towards the earth. Right? Muscles help fight that. They also help move your skeleton. Right? Obviously, they attach to your bones and everything like that, so they help you move around. And the final function is heat production. We also talked about that when we were talking about the integumentary system, right? Because muscles produce the heat, so in turn your integumentary system and the sweat glands produces sweat to help cool your body down through the process of evaporative cooling. Okay, there are three major types of muscles that we're going to talk about: smooth, cardiac, and skeletal. The first one, smooth muscles, is an involuntary muscle. In this case, involuntary means that it's controlled automatically in your body. It's not something that you consciously think about and make the decision to do. An example of a smooth involuntary muscle would be your esophagus. Right? Once you've chewed food up and swallow it, it goes into your esophagus. And the process of muscular contractions that move the food down through your esophagus to your stomach is involuntary. You don't sit there and think to yourself, okay, esophagus, push the food down. Come on, squeeze the food down. Come on, move the food down. Right? It just happens. And so that's what the term involuntary means applied to smooth muscle. Now, another type of involuntary muscle is cardiac. I left a little blank underneath where it says involuntary to kind of give you a moment to test yourself and make sure you knew what the root cardio or cardia meant. I'm going to assume you said heart. Excellent, right? Your cardiac muscle, your heart muscle, is an involuntary muscle. Same kind of thing applies, right? You don't sit there and tell your heart to beat. You don't tell your atria and ventricle to contract and relax and pump the blood through your body. It just happens, right? Now, I've heard a couple people mention the concept of a diaphragm. Diaphragm is quite interesting because it can be both voluntary and involuntary. Right? It's voluntary because more often than not, you breathe, you don't think about it, your body just automatically does it. The diaphragm will expand and contract and cause your body to inhale and exhale air. But you can control it. Right? You can sit there and think, okay, I want to breathe out 5 quick breaths and go right? So I just had control over my diaphragm there. However, a minute from now I'm not even going to be thinking about breathing, but my body is going to continue to do it. Right, now the third type of muscle that we're going to go over is skeletal. Now this is a voluntary muscle. Right? You actually do think, okay, I want to move. And now it might not be a super conscious thought like, I'm going to get up and walk over there to the other side of the room. And when you stand up, you sit there and say, okay, hamstrings and quadriceps, I want you to work in a coordinated motion that will cause my leg to bend and start walking in that direction. But you do have to think about it. It's a decision that you make consciously. Even a reflex, right? Although it's a quick decision, right? It does involve sensory neurons and motor neurons causing this movement, right? It's not part of that autonomic nervous system that just controls things automatically. Alright, now moving on to the actual structures of skeletal muscle. Now I say skeletal muscle specifically because this first thing, the fascia, this first structure, is only in skeletal muscles. And if you look at what it becomes, the fact that it becomes a tendon should be a dead giveaway that it's only involved with skeletal muscles. Because the tendons are necessary to hold the joints together, to stabilize the joints, right? Remember we talked about that earlier. So when you bend your arm, your radius, ulna, and humerus don't all pop apart from one another and just start wiggling around all over the place and constantly pop out a joint. It's the tendons that hold it there and keep that joint stable when you're bending it and flexing it. all that good stuff. So, the fascia is very important, but only found with skeletal muscles. Now, the next thing, myofibrils, would apply to anything. Myo meaning muscle, fibrils meaning fibers, hence that it says muscle fibers underneath it. And these are actually involved in the process of contraction. I do have another lecture that I'll be giving you guys later this week on muscle contraction itself, so we're not going to go into too much detail of the functions of these structures. Now, these myofibrils have different parts. We're going to talk about two of the key filaments. They're actin and myosin. Actin is a thin filament, myosin is a thick filament. Again, these are both involved in the process of muscle contraction, but I do have another lecture where we're going to get into the functions of muscle contraction, all these different structures that we've talked about, and how they're actually involved in a muscle contracting. The final part of this lecture is just getting to understand the term peristalsis. Peristalsis is actually a process. It's a movement through smooth muscle. Now, if you remember, the example of smooth muscle I gave earlier was your esophagus. So you swallow food, right, and it enters into your esophagus. And we did mention that there are muscular contractions that then push it down into the stomach and on through your digestive system. But there is a specific type of movement that pushes food through these circular organs, hollow organs. Right? It's called peristalsis. And the best way I can think to describe it is it actually moves very similar to how you would want to milk a cow. Right? It's squeezing kind of up and down through the circular motion to push something through a tube. In class, I also do a demonstration where I take a tennis ball and I put it inside of a sock. And the easiest way to get it out is to actually take your hand, if you could imagine this, and sort of physically start squeezing around the top of the tennis ball all the way around in a complete circle to start pushing it down through the sock to get it out. That's how peristalsis works.